The city of Stalingrad lay on the western banks of the mighty Volga, a river that had witnessed centuries of trade, invasion, and migration. By the summer of 1942, it had become more than just a city. It had become a symbol, a prize whose capture would signify dominance on the Eastern Front. For Joseph Stalin, the city carried his own name, a testament to his authority, and he demanded it be defended at all costs. As the German Sixth Army advanced, the flat plains surrounding Stalingrad were alive with the roar of engines and the ominous shadow of mechanized columns. The Luftwaffe had already begun its terror, flattening entire neighborhoods with relentless bombing raids. Smoke and dust hung over the city, turning streets into rivers of debris, and the riverbanks were dotted with shattered barges and burning warehouses. Civilians huddled in basements, watching their world dissolve under the onslaught of modern warfare, while Soviet defenders prepared for a battle unlike any they had yet encountered. The German advance was methodical, calculated, and unrelenting. Tanks rolled forward, infantry followed in waves, and artillery pounded defensive positions to rubble. Yet the Soviets refused to yield. Snipers nestled in the ruins picked off German soldiers, machine guns tore through advancing lines, and the winter-cold Volga became both a lifeline and a battlefield, as reinforcements were ferried across under fire. The streets, once filled with the hum of daily life, became a labyrinth of death. Factories were transformed into fortresses, grain elevators into citadels, and apartment buildings into machine gun nests. Every corner turned by a German soldier could conceal a Soviet fighter ready to fight to the last breath. The air itself seemed to carry the cries of both man and machine, mingling with the smell of gunpowder, smoke, and blood. It was a battle that would not merely be fought but endured, a city reduced to rubble yet alive with unyielding resistance. As the summer sun blazed over the shattered streets, it illuminated the paradox of Stalingrad, a city almost obliterated, yet filled with a defiance that no army could easily break. The strategic calculations of generals met the raw, desperate courage of ordinary soldiers and civilians alike, creating a tension that set the stage for a confrontation of unprecedented ferocity. The city itself seemed to resist occupation, each street and building a silent witness to the unfolding catastrophe, a monument to both human ingenuity and the horrors of war. The winter of 1942 descended with unforgiving brutality. Temperatures dropped far below freezing, frosting the ruins of Stalingrad and turning blood into icicles on the streets. The harsh cold became a weapon, one wielded not by generals, but by the environment itself. Soldiers on both sides suffered frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion, yet neither yielded. The Germans, overextended and trapped by logistics, stretched to breaking, found themselves fighting not just an enemy, but the elements. Supply lines running hundreds of kilometers through hostile territory were constantly under threat from Soviet partisans and air attacks. Ammunition, food, and medical supplies dwindled, and the once confident advance stalled as soldiers dug into frozen soil, building trenches and bunkers with numb fingers. The Soviets, conversely, had the advantage of familiarity and home terrain. Their winter clothing, improvised heating methods, and the resolve born of defending their homeland became crucial. Reinforcements flowed along the Volga, crossing ice-choked waters to sustain embattled units, while partisan activity disrupted German convoys and communication lines. Amid the desolation, moments of humanity flickered through the chaos, a shared piece of bread, a whispered reassurance, a fleeting camaraderie forged in the crucible of mutual suffering. Yet the battle remained relentless. Snipers picked off officers, artillery barrages shattered trenches, and street-to-street combat devolved into a brutal contest for every building. Entire city blocks changed hands multiple times in a single day, each occupation accompanied by a bloody struggle that left streets littered with the dead and dying. Corpses froze where they fell, and the stench of decay mingled with smoke and frost, creating a landscape both surreal and nightmarish. Reports filtered back to the high command, numbers crunched on maps, and strategies recalculated in faraway headquarters. But these could not capture the human dimension, the terror, determination, and exhaustion that defined the battle. Here, strategy met reality in its most stark form. Even as the Germans clung to their positions and pushed forward in desperate offensives, the Soviets implemented counter-offensives that, while costly, disrupted every calculation. Snipers in ruined theaters, hidden machine gun nests in collapsed factories, and ambushes along narrow alleyways slowed the mechanized might of the Wehrmacht. Every meter gained by the Germans demanded an exorbitant cost in lives and material. The winter's darkness, stretching into months, became both literal and metaphorical, a reflection of the despair and resolve that defined Stalingrad. The encirclement, known as Operation Uranus, marked the turning point in the long, brutal struggle for Stalingrad. Soviet planners, having watched the German advance carefully, identified weaknesses in the overstretched flanks held by Axis allies, the Romanians, Italians and Hungarians, who were poorly equipped and inadequately trained for the brutal winter and Soviet tactics. When the counteroffensive struck in November 1942, it hit with precision and overwhelming force. Panzers and mechanized infantry spearheaded the Soviet thrust, rolling over weak defenses and cutting supply lines, while mobile units encircled the German Sixth Army, trapping hundreds of thousands of soldiers within the city. The realization of entrapment sent shockwaves through the German command. Inside the pocket, soldiers and civilians alike were forced to confront the harsh reality of isolation. Supplies dwindled further, hunger gnawed relentlessly, and the bitter cold deepened suffering. Soldiers scavenged what they could. Horse meat, cats, even leather from belts and boots became sources of sustenance. Morale faltered but did not collapse entirely. Military discipline, fear of retribution, and a stubborn will to survive kept many fighting, even as death became an omnipresent companion. The Soviets, meanwhile, executed the encirclement with disciplined coordination, utilizing armored divisions to block escape routes, while infantry and artillery sealed gaps. Communication with the outside world was fraught but effective enough to allow resupply attempts via air, though many planes were shot down or forced to turn back. The city, already a ruin, became a frozen graveyard as fighting intensified. Entire regiments were annihilated in single engagements. Buildings that had been fiercely defended were reduced to rubble again, and streets ran with blood beneath layers of frost. Yet even in these conditions, acts of heroism and cunning emerged. Small Soviet units exploited gaps in German lines, ambushing relief columns and rescuing isolated soldiers. German officers attempted breakout attempts, often at terrible cost, while the Luftwaffe tried, ultimately unsuccessfully, to keep their embattled troops alive from the air. The encirclement turned Stalingrad from a contested city into a trap, a colossal human vise that would slowly crush those caught within, transforming the strategic situation on the Eastern Front and altering the course of the war forever. As winter deepened into 1943, the human cost of Stalingrad became painfully apparent. The city had transformed into a desolate landscape where the dead were often indistinguishable from the ruins they once inhabited. Inside the encircled pocket, starvation was rampant. Soldiers lost tens of kilograms in weight, their bodies weakened, minds clouded by hunger and exhaustion. Disease spread rapidly. Dysentery, typhus, and frostbite claimed more lives than bullets. Even the strongest among the trapped soldiers faced collapse, and those who survived often did so by sheer force of will. Civilians, too, endured unimaginable suffering. Families huddled in basements, rationing scraps of food, attempting to maintain some semblance of daily life amid relentless shelling. The psychological toll was immense. The constant proximity of death, the unending sound of artillery, and the pervasive sense of hopelessness created an atmosphere of despair that few could escape. Yet, remarkably, the human spirit persisted. Underground networks helped smuggle food and messages, makeshift hospitals operated in basements, and people found small ways to preserve dignity. The Germans, still adhering to Hitler's orders, attempted to hold defensive lines while the Soviets tightened their grip. Daily combat devolved into desperate firefights over single buildings, each street a miniature battlefield. Snipers stalked shattered apartment blocks, artillery pounded every approach, and close-quarters combat, often hand-to-hand, became routine. Military hierarchy became both a lifeline and a source of tension. Officers struggled to maintain order, prevent mutiny, and enforced discipline, while soldiers struggled to reconcile duty with the instinct to survive. Outside the encirclement, the Soviet Union had achieved a critical strategic advantage. Resources that had been committed elsewhere could now focus on the trapped Germans. And propaganda emphasized the victory as a testament to Soviet resilience and military ingenuity. The wider implications were profound. Stalingrad was no longer just a city or a battle. It had become a symbol of endurance, sacrifice, and the brutal calculus of total war. Reports from the front conveyed staggering numbers, but these statistics, thousands dead daily, tens of thousands wounded, could never fully capture the human suffering. Each casualty represented a life extinguished, a family torn apart, a story lost amid the chaos of history. The city's streets, once centers of commerce and life, became silent witnesses to this human tragedy, frozen in time yet searingly vivid in memory. By late January 1943, the German position had become untenable. Supplies were exhausted, soldiers were starving, and morale had disintegrated into despair and resignation. Attempts at a breakout, including Operation Winter Storm, failed under coordinated Soviet resistance. The Luftwaffe's last efforts to airlift provisions into the pocket had largely collapsed under relentless anti-aircraft fire and the harsh winter weather. German commanders faced impossible choices: continue to resist and face total annihilation, or surrender and hope for humane treatment. The surrender, when it came, was massive in scale and shocking in its human toll. Over 90,000 German soldiers became prisoners of war, many in frail health, and thousands would die in captivity due to exposure, malnutrition, and disease. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. For the Soviets, victory validated years of sacrifice and solidified the legend of resilience that would fuel further military campaigns. For Germany, it marked a turning point, shattering the myth of invincibility that had sustained the Wehrmacht through earlier campaigns. The aftermath was marked by grim logistical challenges. The Soviets faced the monumental task of managing prisoners, clearing the devastated city, and reconstructing vital infrastructure to continue the war effort. Stalingrad, though no longer a battlefield, remained a symbol of human endurance under extreme conditions. For the civilians who survived, the city offered a haunting landscape of ruins and memories, where each corner held the evidence of death, defiance, and endurance. Social structures had collapsed, and survivors had to navigate a new reality of reconstruction amid persistent scarcity. Cultural memory of the battle, preserved in letters, photographs, and oral histories, painted a picture of unimaginable hardship, heroism, and suffering. Military analysts would later examine Stalingrad in detail, dissecting tactics, strategies, and failures, yet these analyses often missed the personal dimension, the thousands of individual human stories that collectively defined the siege. The city had witnessed the extremes of modern warfare: the total mobilization of resources, the manipulation of civilian populations, and the confrontation with environmental extremes. Stalingrad became both a cautionary tale and an enduring example of human resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The scale of the Stalingrad battle reshaped military doctrine and strategy on both sides of the conflict. The clash of urban warfare, extreme winter conditions, and combined arms operations forced generals to rethink conventional approaches. Soviet forces, having successfully executed deep encirclement maneuvers, demonstrated the effectiveness of strategic reserves, intelligence, and coordination among infantry, armor, and artillery. German military planners, confronted with the failure of the Sixth Army and the loss of entire divisions, were forced to reconsider supply chain vulnerabilities, overextension of front lines, and the perils of underestimating an opponent's capacity for counter-offensive. Lessons learned in Stalingrad echoed throughout subsequent campaigns. Urban warfare tactics, sniper deployment, fortified building defenses, close-quarter combat became central to military planning in other theaters. Logistics, previously taken for granted, emerged as a decisive factor, highlighting the impossibility of sustaining mechanized armies without secure lines of supply. The human cost was equally instructive. Both military and civilian casualties provided stark evidence of the limits of endurance and the necessity of psychological and logistical preparation for prolonged engagements. Beyond tactical and operational lessons, the battle had political consequences. Stalin's image as an unyielding leader was reinforced, bolstering Soviet morale and consolidating internal authority. For Hitler, the defeat eroded credibility among generals and strained relations with allies whose forces had crumbled under Soviet pressure. Propaganda, both during and after the battle, emphasized heroism and sacrifice, creating enduring narratives of national pride, resilience, and cautionary warning. In the wider context of World War II, Stalingrad marked the beginning of a shift in momentum on the Eastern Front. The German advance into Soviet territory, previously relentless, would slow, falter, and eventually reverse, while the Soviet military gained confidence, experience, and momentum that would culminate in subsequent victories. The city itself, though devastated, became a symbol, a testament to the potential of human endurance and strategic ingenuity, and a stark reminder of the consequences of hubris, underestimation, and logistical overreach in modern warfare. Monuments and memorials erected in the post-war period would further cement Stalingrad's legacy, transforming the battlefield into a site of memory, reflection, and instruction. For historians, military analysts, and the general public alike, the lessons of Stalingrad remain vital, bridging the human, tactical, and political dimensions of war. The echoes of Stalingrad resonate far beyond the winter of 1942-43, reverberating through history as a testament to the extremes of human experience in war. Survivors, both soldiers and civilians, carried memories of the city's destruction, the relentless combat, and the sacrifices made into the post-war era. Literature, films, and memoirs sought to capture these experiences, painting vivid pictures of the harrowing conditions, the acts of courage, and the complex moral dilemmas faced daily. Scholars have since debated the decisions of generals, the effectiveness of strategies, and the inevitability of the outcome. But these discussions only capture part of the story. Stalingrad was more than a military engagement. It was a human drama played out on a scale almost unimaginable, where the choices of individuals intertwined with the forces of history. The city itself, rebuilt from ruins, became a living memorial, a testament to resilience, reconstruction, and remembrance. Annual commemorations honor those who fought and died, bridging the gap between historical events and collective memory. The strategic implications continued to unfold. The Eastern Front would tilt decisively toward the Soviets, marking a shift that would influence the outcome of World War II. Stalingrad's lessons in urban combat, logistics, winter warfare, and human endurance have become case studies in military academies worldwide. Yet perhaps the most enduring lesson is the reminder of the human cost. The thousands of lives lost, the families torn apart, the communities obliterated, and the profound suffering endured. These losses underscore the gravity of total war, where victory is measured not just in territory gained, but in lives preserved and societies reshaped. As we walk through the history of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that this battle was not merely a moment in time, but a crucible of human experience. Its legacy transcends strategy, tactics, and political ideology. It is a story of survival, courage, and the indomitable will to endure. In every ruined street, in every frozen corpse, in every whispered memory, Stalingrad speaks to us across generations, demanding that we remember, reflect, and learn. The bloodshed, suffering, and resilience of that winter are immortalized not only in history books, but in the consciousness of humanity, a stark reminder of the fragility and tenacity of life amidst the chaos of war. Through this lens, Stalingrad remains the bloodiest battle in human history, a chapter of unparalleled human drama that continues to shape our understanding of courage, sacrifice, and the costs of conflict.